give people a bit of time to join. Welcome,
Sure.
everyone. Welcome, Pascalia, Miriam. Tell us how your day has been by dropping an emoji on the comments. What emoji best describes your day? Nice. Yay, we can both be seen. So let's say just wanted us to be like live and stop practicing. Welcome, guys. Thank you for joining. So I think I'll start at around 8:05. No, like in the next 2 minutes, 8:04 there. So you can give people a bit of time to join. Yeah, so I can see Gina is feeling flowery. And boy, that is drinks. It's Thursday. Wait for Friday, man. Wait for Friday. Welcome, guys. Thank you so much for joining. Share with your friends. Tell them there's an amazing about to be live and they should join. Yeah. Let me do that also. Mm. How are you feeling? What is your emoji for the day?
I, I already put 3 smiley faces, but I'm gonna
Smiley
put
face.
another one.
Ah.
Um, I'm feeling great. It's officially the Eid break here in
Oh,
Ghana, so it's been a
yeah.
really lovely, relaxed, restful day. And yeah, I'm excited to jump into this topic with everyone. So thanks again for having me.
Happy to have you.
Mm.
For me, my day has been, I feel a lot. A lot has been happening today. So many things were just like urgent. It's like they just waited me to get off the mid-week break
Mhm.
and get to work. So yeah, it was just one of those days. And then I had the live, and we also have a new episode on our channel.
Mhm.
So that's dropping that. We're also working on that today. So yeah, it has been quite a hectic day, but I'm happy. I think I was really looking forward to having this
Oh
conversation.
yeah, me
Yeah, that's
too.
the
Me
highlight
too.
of my day. Yeah. Thank you,
Yeah.
Shamim, for joining. Thank you, the Afri Nomad, for joining. I think we can start off because, as we know, Instagram has a hard stop for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll start by just a minute. I'll start by introducing Howard, which I think it's such an honor.
Thank you. Same here.
Yes. So our guest today is Hawa Kombian. She is a leader who helps businesses and their teams work better together. And she also has a lot of experience in making business successful in different parts of the world. Howard runs her own company called Hawa Kombian Consulting, where she helps African leaders plan for the future of work. She also helps businesses become more responsible to their communities and the environment through a nonprofit called the B Lab Africa. Hawa is a great speaker, writer, coach who knows how to make your team succeed. So if you're here and you're a business person, Hawa Kombia is your person. So welcome, Hawa, to We Are Feel. We're happy to have you. Thank you so much for honoring us with your time
Mhm.
and with your knowledge that you're about to share with our community. We really appreciate. Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much, Leah and Rita, for having me. I've been following you both for a while, and it's really exciting to see what you're doing in Kenya and for the community and having conversations like this. So thank you as well.
Thank you so much. So I think we'll
Mhm.
just get into it. The topic of today is navigating toxic work environments. I've had my own share of working in a toxic work environment, and I was sharing with my community that um, in the workplace that I was, and that
Mhm.
was toxic, it really affected me both mentally, emotionally, that ended up affecting performance, your motivation, even your view of yourself. So I feel like toxic work environment is not just about performance; it also like really hits at the core and identity of who you are. And I think and I think most people struggle and do not know how to approach such situations. I did not. I don't think I had the tools to help me
Mhm.
navigate such a work environment. And I think as we move on in life, and also kwanza when you're starting work, uh, and you enter in such a place, you really feel like maybe this is how things are done, you know.
Mhm.
So we are here to define what this kind of environment
Absolutely.
is like and how to be able to navigate it in the best way possible. So I'll start with first understanding what is an organizational culture, because I know at the core of any work environment is the organizational culture. So what is it? How would you define it?
Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing that, Leah. I think we've
Yeah.
all, everything you shared was very relatable. I'm sure you could see me nodding
Yeah.
in agreement. And yeah, I love that we're jumping into this to break down what
Mm.
actually is organizational culture because people
Yeah.
talk about it a lot
What?
and the
Yeah.
definitions vary widely. So,
Mm.
in its simplest terms, I would say that organizational culture is the way that things are done in an organization.
Mm.
That's the
Yeah.
simplest surface level answer I can give. So let's
Yeah.
dive a little deeper, shall we?
Yes. Yes, please.
So, one way that that happens that many of us are familiar with, even from day one, even before we start, are
Mm-hmm.
things like policies, right? We normally sign a
Mm-hmm.
contract before we start working. There are rules in that contract. It probably hopefully outlines what your job description is, what you're expected to do, what you will get back in the transaction. A lot of those
Mm-hmm.
policies and things like that are a very simple and straightforward way of
Yeah.
organizations communicating to people this is how we go about running our business, engaging with our
Yeah.
staff. And of course, it can go from working with staff to working with partners, to
Mm.
working with external suppliers. A lot
Yeah.
of these policies and rules help set up the structure. So that's
Mm.
kind of the obvious side of
Right.
organizational culture, right? The whole
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
oh, you can only take a lunch break between 12 and 2 p.m. Those
Yeah.
pieces, those rules, right? Or even the remote working policy, that is
Mm.
part of the culture of where we work. Then
Yeah.
the other side that speaks to what you were saying about mental health, emotional health,
Mm.
is about the behaviors that people practice and the behaviors that get normalized, right? So
Mm.
if you're on a
Yeah.
team where it's normal for your manager to always be late during your check-in, that's part of your team
Exactly.
culture. You know, it
Oh,
happens the
yeah.
first time and you're maybe like, okay, they forgot, that's fine. It happens the
Yeah.
second time, you're like, okay, he or she had a great reason. By month 6, when you're like, oh yeah, 100%, this person's going to be 15 minutes late to our meeting, that is
Yeah.
now creating a routine. It creates an
Mm.
expectation for people that, yeah, I assume, I expect my boss to come late to
Yeah.
this meeting. And
Yeah.
those little behaviors over time becoming
You
consistent,
build that.
that also creates part of the culture. So I
Oh.
think it's important for us to recognize that just as in our interpersonal relationships, we have people in our lives who say one thing and do another, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And culture in organizations can also operate that way. Even though
Mm.
we sometimes, and let me speak for myself, when I
Yeah.
came into the workplace, I was like, okay, work, everything's official, everything's formal, everything's
Mm.
structured. I know what I'm
Yeah.
doing, other people know what they're doing. There will be no confusion. You
Mm.
know, there will be no
Straightforward.
misalignment. Yeah, it will all be
Mm.
straightforward. If we're meeting at 10, we're meeting at 10. And then you
Mm.
get into the workplace, you meet people who have different personalities, you meet people who have different ways of working,
Yeah.
and we realize that it is actually quite an incredible ask to have people from different walks of life who know nothing
Mm.
about each other come into one space and all follow the
I
same
like that.
mode of
Like,
operation and
mm.
behavior. So it
Yeah.
is necessary and it is helpful in organizations. At the same time, we often see that it's not such a straight line because there are all of these variable factors of how people
Yeah.
choose to behave and
Yeah.
also how people are incentivized to behave in an organization, right?
Mm.
Because
Yeah.
let's go back
True.
to my example of a manager who shows up 15 minutes late to every meeting. If
Yeah.
there's a system in our company that says that is a policy that we don't allow, and we have an approach to address a situation where managers show up late, then that won't become part of the culture. It won't
Mm.
become an underlying piece of culture. It will become
True.
addressed. But if the organization says, oh, well, we haven't really addressed that and we don't really know what to do, and that's up to you and your manager, then
Yeah.
it just becomes open to interpretation. So I hope that answers your question,
Definitely.
and that
Yeah.
hopefully folks on the line feel that that response
Mhm.
makes sense and
Yeah.
maybe resonates with something
Yeah.
that they've experienced as well.
Yeah. So guys, make sure that you drop your comments. Let us know what you're thinking as we
Mm-hmm.
tackle this topic. And I like what you've said that sometimes we actually have rules that are also set, but behavior sometimes overrules the rules. You know, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It's like goes above the rules. So, for
Mm-hmm.
example, if there's a rule of not getting late, but lateness is tolerated, then there's a high probability this rule will not be followed, and so the culture of the organization will be on lateness despite it having like rules and regulations around lateness. And so like just babies, how
Exactly.
we follow what we see is how the babies act. In a way, that's how also us as adults do it. You know, oh, my boss is late, so I can also be late 15 minutes, and
Mm-hmm.
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So how does culture play a significant role in perpetuating or mitigating toxic work environment?
So the thing with
And who
culture is,
and who sets
sorry,
it? And who sets the tone for organization culture?
okay.
Yeah.
So I love to think of culture as a tool, right? Because in
Mm,
most organizations, we have all come together, we all show up virtually or in person at our workplace
yeah.
to meet an objective, to achieve certain goals, etc.
Yeah.
So when you think about culture, it is actually a tool that is meant to support us achieving
Mm,
these goals and objectives of the business, right? And
yeah.
as we know, any tool can be misused. It can be used effectively or
Mm,
ineffectively. And
effectively.
so,
Um,
just as we were saying, right, culture can be used to be that manager who makes time for everyone who reports to him or her,
yeah.
right? Culture can be used to recognize the achievements of staff. Culture can be used to communicate change so that
Mm,
people understand, oh, when I show up at work in the next couple weeks, this is where I need to be focusing. This is what I need to be doing. This is the
yeah.
way I need to do things now. And that is a very simple way and a few examples that culture helps improve
Mm,
performance in organizations, right? Because it
yeah.
actually helps people connect better. Whether it's
Mm-hmm.
just through I understand you better, whether it's through I actually I actually know you better and I like you and understand how you work. And so it's
Mm-hmm.
easier to work towards these goals. That is
Yeah.
what the tool of culture is meant to do.
Mm-hmm.
So we can literally flip all of that on its head, Leah, and say, when you're doing the opposite of all of that, what are you doing? When you're not communicating with the team, when managers
Mm,
decide, oh, I'll check in with you during your performance review. That'll be the one time all year
time
that
that
we
was
actually speak. It
yeah.
comes back to what you said about what does that do to your mental and emotional health. It makes you
Yeah.
feel like
Yeah.
you don't matter, like you're not
Mm-hmm.
seen, like your
Yeah.
contributions are not making an
Not that,
impact. And
yeah,
what does
being
that do?
recognized.
It makes you go, well, what's the point? What am I doing here? So if in a
Yeah.
day, Leah can write 10 articles for the online magazine she works for, and because she has not been engaged in a healthy culture, she's now like, well, nobody
Mm,
cares. Let me just write 2 articles.
yeah.
Done. Doesn't matter. And so when culture is unhealthy, when it's not doing its job of recognizing and supporting people and helping to bring people together,
Mm.
that's when
Yeah,
organizations start to see all of the common cliche things that we hear businesses struggling in. We're not making
mm.
revenue. We're not hitting our outputs. Our team can't collaborate because the tool that is actually there to support everyone in doing that is being
Yeah.
used improperly and ineffectively. So hopefully that
Mm.
answers kind of
Yeah.
how can culture be mitigated or worsened
Yeah.
in some situations? And then in
Yes.
terms of responsibility, you know, the kumbaya answer to this, Leah, is that we all have a responsibility to this. And that is
Yeah.
true, right? We
Yeah. I
all
agree.
show up, we all come to the workplace, we're all bringing our
Mm.
ideas and our unique set of skills. At the
Yeah.
same time, certain people have abilities to make decisions in organizations. Certain
Yeah.
people have veto power, where if they say no and everyone else is saying yes, their no carries weight. And
Yeah.
so we have to recognize that leaders, anyone in a formal leadership role, you have a responsibility towards culture.
Mm.
Founders, CEOs, people in operations, I would say, and people
Yeah.
in like the culture and HR roles, you
Yes.
play an incredible role
Mm.
in building culture because HR is typically the ones putting out those policies. Your
True.
whistleblower policy, your vacation
Yeah.
policy, your like all
Yeah.
of those things that are the structure of the rules.
Mm-hmm.
And then the operations team is often saying, this is the way that we are working towards our goal as a company,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Through
Yeah.
all the different functions we have. This is how things
Yeah.
work. This is when we talk to each other. This is when we report. And that plays into how people show up every day. And
Yeah.
then leadership needs to have an awareness of what kind of environment and dynamic they want to create amongst people as
Yeah.
they are focused on the long-term vision of the company, right? Are
Yeah.
you a leader who's like, yeah, it doesn't bother me if every 6 months people leave, I'm not bothered? Or are you a leader who's
Mm.
thinking, I want to build like a business where there's succession, where someone who comes
Yeah.
in as an intern can be a VP someday? Because even just that
True.
mindset as a founder, it changes the way that you guide your HR team to create policies.
Yeah.
It changes the way you guide your operations team to say,
So
okay,
true.
actually, we don't have to produce at
Mm.
200%. Let's produce
Yeah.
at 75 and let's be steady.
Leadership.
Let's give
Yeah.
everyone their energy. And then over
Yeah.
time, we can ramp it up. And so, I think it's really important to recognize that those kinds of leaders, they play such a big role. And then
Mm-hmm.
lastly, from the perspective of staff, right? Like the people who are actually impacted by culture. I
Mm.
think this is where there's room to be more mindful about what your needs actually are and feeling like you
Oh,
have the
okay.
confidence to voice that. Because
Mm.
the truth, Leah, that maybe some of us don't want to admit is that we don't know everything. And
True.
honestly, sometimes these leaders, it has been a long time since they've been in the shoes of someone junior, right? And even
Mm.
times are changing. Like now that we have AI and tech and we're doing
Yeah.
remote work, there are many people who are in leadership positions today who
And
didn't
then
see any of that when they were coming up.
true.
So it is important to lean into a mindset of great. How can I
Mm.
communicate what isn't working with a leader?
Mm.
How can I
Yeah.
share what might be a better situation and to be open as someone
Yeah.
who's part of the workforce to saying, I want to contribute to a culture that makes me feel good, that allows me to do meaningful work
Mm.
and supports the
Yeah.
company. That way it's a
True.
win-win-win. And it isn't either side feeling like, oh, well, if you get what I want, I'm losing, because that's
Mm.
often the tension that you feel in
Definitely.
organizations,
Yeah.
right? Where
True.
leaders are like,
True.
no, we don't want to do what would be best for the workers. That's going to lose us
Mm-hmm.
profit. That's going to lose us revenue. It's going to take
We do not
time.
know much.
Exactly,
Kind of
right? But
thing.
there's a way
Yeah.
to look at this where it's if
Mm.
everybody's winning, then that's what creates sustainability.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
that's such great gems. I like the fact that you've said organization culture is a tool, and I think that brings like a whole different perspective in that you can like make this tool work in the way that you'd want it to work. And so if you use this tool for good, then definitely it's like example, but what came to mind was a gun. You can use a gun for safety, or you can also use a gun for to just kill people or like do something bad with it. So
Yeah.
that it really highlights how important knowing what the organization culture is, and then what exactly do you want to do with it within this organization. And I think the other point for me that has really stood out is the fact that both managers and the employees, or leadership and the employees, have contribution to how the organization culture ends up being, and also
Mhm.
creating a place where both feel safe to voice and listen,
Yes.
in a way that we collaborate to win and achieve the organizational objective. I think that is amazing, because sometimes as employees we feel like that is not my role. That should be the
Mm.
leadership who kind of like figures that out. But also understanding that also these leaders are human beings, and maybe your input and what you have in mind might be the one thing that ends up accelerating
Mhm.
whatever you're working on, or even building a better culture within your team. So that's great. I think one of the other things, when we are in this kind of environment, sometimes we are
Mhm.
usually like on challenging work environment, and sometimes we term it as a toxic work environment. And so what exactly, let's define this. So how do you know you're
Yeah.
in a challenging work environment, or even a challenging season in your business? Because sometimes there are times companies, you're just like on a different drive, you know.
Yeah.
And when do you know, like, now this is definitely a toxic work environment, and I need to know how to navigate this better. Yeah.
Yeah. I think this is a great question, and it flows really nicely from what we've just been
Yeah.
talking about. So,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, organizations are systems, and systems are made
Mm,
up of people, processes, and tools. If
yeah.
anybody remembers anything from this IG, I just want people to walk away with the people, process, and tools. And so
Mm,
for me, a challenging environment is one where I can look at the situation and say, okay, there's either something in the dynamics amongst people, the
yeah.
process that we're using, or the tools that are supposed to be helping us that isn't working.
Yeah.
And when I bring this up, firstly, it's safe for me to bring it up. And when I bring it
Mm,
up, people are willing to listen to me and engage in a
yeah.
meaningful discussion, right? Because sometimes a challenging situation is about perception, right? Like if I'm a person who struggles to
Mm,
speak up and communicate that
yeah.
something isn't working for me, I might just be like, this is really challenging. However, at the
Mm,
moment that I say, okay, supervisor, great, we're in our weekly one-on-one. I'd like to share with you that I'm struggling in this area. This is maybe
yeah.
not working. I have recommendations about this, that, or the other. And your supervisor goes, that's great. I love
Yeah.
that. Okay, awesome. Why don't we use your second suggestion and let's test that for 2 weeks and see if it works better. And then we can change the process,
Yes.
right? So that's an environment where the challenge is actually an opportunity as an individual
Mm,
to step into saying, okay, how can I be part of the solution? How can I show my own level of leadership, regardless of my title, right?
yes.
Regardless of how long I've been here, regardless of my tenure, regardless of anything, how can I show my own sense of leadership and
Yeah.
say, okay, I can see a way to address this. And if people are willing to work with me, we can all move forward together. And again, win, 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 right?
Yeah.
Versus I
Yes.
think
This is the goal.
a toxic environment, Leah, is one where you recognize that and the space to speak up isn't there. It isn't afforded you.
That's
No one wants
good.
to hear it, right? Everyone's like, no, no, no. Do the status quo, do the
Mm,
old thing, even if it makes zero sense.
yeah. Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that kind of environment is toxic where there's not a willingness to listen, to
Mm,
come up with solutions together, or to put
yeah.
solutions in place. Because you also have some work environments where everyone's happy to talk to you. They'll talk until the cows come home. But the minute it's like, hey, are we ready to implement? We've all sat down and agreed
Let's put the
that
tools. Yeah.
something better could be in place. Are we ready to go there? Decision makers, are you ready to
Mm,
say, yes, let's move forward, let's try, let's change? And that's when
despite,
people will sit there and be like, maybe later, I don't know, not right now. And
yeah.
it's that cycle of, oh, I'm listening to you. and I'm giving you affirmation that we can address things, but I'm not really willing to change.
Mm,
And that can also be toxic. Having people that want to
yeah.
spoon feed you, that they're hearing you and
Mhm.
they are going to support you, and then when it
Yeah.
comes to that moment of truth, they're not
Nothing
ready.
is done. Yeah.
Yeah,
It really screams like toxic relationships. Like I feel like
absolutely.
we
Well
can
said.
easily just be having relationships here. But that makes a lot of sense, in the sense that first challenge is at a perception. That just like hit
Yeah.
home. That
Yeah.
sometimes there are things that I might view as a challenge that my colleague doesn't. But
Mm-hmm.
also it's just like more about also the kind of environment that has already been set up for me, knowing whether if I actually even voiced out what I think is a challenge to me, will there be someone who meets me with empathy? And now
Exactly.
after meeting with
Beautiful.
empathy, is there someone who that person ready to work with me to action whatever needs to be actioned? And sometimes also this comes with people not also wanting to sit out of their comfort zone, right? Because sometimes what is
Mm-hmm.
a challenge to me, I bring it to my manager. Maybe they do not know how to handle it. And so then also for us to step out of this comfort that we are in and like explore the discomfort together, I think maybe that's where the lack of action comes in. Because I'm thinking they're like, I don't want to seem as if I do not know what needs to happen next. So it's just like, let us just remain in this quagmire situation. So
Oh, I think
yeah,
that that is so beautifully said, Leah, and I'm
yeah.
really happy that you use the word empathy.
Mm,
Empathy, humility, these are so
yeah.
important when we're dealing with the unknown, right? Because uncertainty makes a
Mm,
lot of us uncomfortable, right?
very
A
true.
lot of
Yeah.
us, and that's natural. That's human
Mm,
nature. But the
yeah.
difference is
Yeah.
sitting in a position of, well, my pride says I have to know everything, and that even giving you an opportunity to provide input takes my power away, right? It's when people
Yeah.
kind of have these distorted perceptions or themselves have even been subjected to harmful forms of people using power, that when
Yeah.
they
Mm,
come into a powerful position, they're like, great, I'm going to repeat what was taught to me. So if people
yeah.
yelled at me, if people shamed me, if people dismissed what I was feeling,
Mm,
that's what I'm going to repeat for other people. And
yeah.
that's not how we grow. It's not how
Mm,
we prepare ourselves,
become better.
especially in Africa, for a future of work where the history that we've been through as a people has been one
Does not
where there has
afford us.
been, yeah, like we have experienced as a people so much command and direction, so much
Mm,
this is what you have to do and you have to listen and this is how it has to work. And we have adopted that even
yeah.
in our independent cultures, right? 54 African countries that are independent, and there is still such a strong culture of you have to do things in a certain order. You must do as I say in the name of respect and diligence. And there are still ways to be respectful to people while listening to them, while
Mm,
communicating with them, while
yeah.
understanding them. And I think that's part of what our pathway and hopefully the legacy that those of us on this IG call will be leaving behind in our organizations, because we
Yeah.
can even have these kind of conversations and have this level of
Mm.
awareness.
Yes, and you're giving us the
Yeah.
tools and the tips to become
That's
to
you.
implement. And just one thing to I'd want to add to that is what
Yeah.
Brene says. Brene is a vulnerability researcher, and she says vulnerability
Yes.
is courage.
Mm-hmm.
And she really tries to teach this a lot to organizations, where you being open and letting people in and letting them know that you do not know everything. It's actually courage. It actually shows that people can relate to who you are as a human being,
Mm-hmm.
than feeling as if you're up there in the skies and we cannot reach you. And that really creates such a huge disconnection.
Yeah.
And so, because you've just mentioned people being able to, I wanted to actually move to setting boundaries.
Okay.
Um, yeah. So how do people able to set boundaries in a toxic work environment,
Mm.
where the person is not ready to listen to you, or it's either their way or the highway. So here, literally, no, you're not able to meet. you already know that this is not a safe space to voice out your concerns, or even if you voice it, there's nothing that happens. How are you able to set boundaries in such an environment? I would assume it is very difficult and very uncomfortable.
The
And
research is
also
still being done on this
and
one.
enforcing
Yeah.
them. Yeah, because already setting them and enforcing them, those are two different things. So how can we set them
Yes.
and enforce these boundaries in a toxic work environment?
Yeah. So this is such a great question, and I love that we're talking about this because it is really difficult and
Mm.
it takes a lot of inner work to be able to move through
Mm.
this process. So I even want to start at the point of being able to recognize within yourself that a
Mhm.
boundary has been crossed and that you don't like it. Your emotions, number one,
Mm.
having compassion for yourself, allowing yourself to have your moments of anger. Don't take it out on anyone, but even if you're just in a room by yourself and you can say, I am so pissed off right now, I am so angry, I don't feel seen, I don't feel heard, communicate that
Mm.
to yourself. Because
Yeah.
when you keep it inside, and especially when you're in an environment where no one will validate that for you, like it's not like the toxic person is going to come to you and say, I'm not hearing you out right now, and actually tell you that that's what they're doing, right? So often
Yeah.
we have to be our own first line of defense and our own first line of
Mm.
recognition. And I
Yeah.
think back to moments in my career when I got so angry, and those moments were catalysts because, I took my
Mm.
30 minutes to like yell at the wall and theoretically talk talk this person down, right? But
Mm.
it was in those moments when I was like, I'm not okay. That situation was not okay. I don't like
Mm.
it, and I'm not prepared to keep putting up with this. And I think even just acknowledging to yourself that this is not okay, this is not
It's
safe,
huge.
I'm not prepared to keep doing it, is such a huge milestone.
Yeah.
Because again, many of us are taught suppress it, get over it, move
Yeah.
on. And where does that go? It sits in your body. And many of us get anxiety, like our mental health
Mm.
takes the weight of that kind of upset and frustration that goes undealt with. So, number
Yeah.
one, I would say recognize it in yourself. Recognize the moments when your emotions are just like, this is not okay,
Mm.
because it's your body talking to
Yeah.
you and being like,
Yeah.
hey, I need you to stand up for us. I need you to do something for us. So, that's
Yeah.
point number one. Then, once you know and you're aware, I think this is where we need to invite in some curiosity. And again, I'll speak for myself. I know that when I get angry and triggered, I'm very like, it's my way or the highway. It needs to be this or it needs to be that, right? Like we get into
Yeah.
very black and white thinking. And
Mm.
that can be where it becomes challenging for people to set boundaries because now we're at extremes, right? Now it's if you have to win, then that means I'm losing. And if I
Yeah.
have to win, that means you're losing. And that's where the
The ego is
contention comes.
activated. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So I think once we get to that point and we're like, oh, like this is what I want and this is what I need, bring it down a notch and start to explore what that gray area looks like. Okay,
Mm.
what would it look like if I worked an extra 2 hours on Friday instead of working the whole weekend? Okay, what would it look like if maybe I could partner with somebody on the team to work on this project instead of needing to do it all myself and having to work on the weekend? This is where you
Mm.
start getting curious, you start brainstorming. And that allows you to come up with alternatives that you're like, actually, I would be comfortable with that. That's a
Mm.
compromise I would be okay with. And
Yeah.
in that way, you also know that you're not crossing your own boundary. Because maybe for
Mm.
you, the point that set you off to anger was they're telling me I have to work a full weekend, a full 16 to 20 hours over the weekend, and that is a
Yeah.
boundary crossed. But a part of you is like, no, I'm okay working 4 hours on Saturday. That seems reasonable to me. So when you allow yourself to explore the gray area and you're not swinging to one side to just people please the
Yeah.
environment, and you're not swinging to the other side to completely
Understand.
defend yourself, and you can explore the gray area, that puts you in a position where you can now say, okay, great, let's talk. Let's have this conversation where I am
Yeah.
now going to offer up and suggest some of the recommendations that I know work for me.
Mm.
And then in that space, and I know it can be difficult when you're in an environment where people have shot you down before, where people are
Yeah.
maybe not listening, but this is one of your best approaches to advocate for what is going to get you more of what you want and need to stay in that
Mm.
workplace, right? Because if the goal is
Yeah.
sustainability, the goal is that you want to stay in that workplace, presumably, if you care enough to, then
Yeah.
we need to find solutions that allow everyone to get their needs met. Again, the win-win-win.
Win,
It
win,
can't
win.
just be, okay, the workplace is draining my energy. I'm getting sick all the time. I have no free time to take care of the rest of my life, and they're happy. That won't
Mm-hmm.
sustain you. You'll
Yeah.
probably burn out, have a nervous breakdown. You'll need to take extended time off. And so, you know, that outcome is inevitable, that at some
Yeah.
point there will be a breakdown if there isn't balance. So
Mm.
I think one of those ways is to come with your brainstormed ideas and attempt to have that conversation and use that conversation as data, because it says a lot if you have
Yeah.
put in the work to regulate your emotions, you have put in the work to come up with suggestions and recommendations that seem fair and feasible, and if someone just looks at you and says, yeah, I don't care, then they're telling you a lot about how much they
Yeah.
value you. And at that point,
True.
you need to ask yourself, great, like, is my self worth what this person is telling me it is? And,
Mm.
you know, that's when it can get a bit more extreme, but that's when you also have to start to ask yourself, what changes am I willing to make? Because the
Yeah.
only thing we have control over is ourselves, despite what people
True.
might think. The only thing we have control over is ourselves.
It's
So
just
I would
yourself. Yeah.
encourage and implore everyone, do your best to practice open communication, do your best to practice meeting in the middle. Those are great skills that will serve you for
Mm.
life. Even if it doesn't get you anywhere in that job, it is amazing to have that skill
Mm.
set. To your point
Yeah.
again, Leah, even in your personal relationships, to be someone
Yeah.
who can regulate their emotions and seek compromise. And if you
Mm.
realize that somebody just has no willingness, again, a toxic system, no willingness to
Yeah.
meet you in the middle, then you can start to ask yourself, listen, what are my alternatives here? Am I prepared to stay here? What is
Mm.
my exit strategy? Where do
Yeah.
I maybe want to move? And again, there's even room to brainstorm at that level. It might mean, do I move to a different team? Because, yeah, we don't all have the
Mm.
luxury of saying, okay, great, I'm leaving this
I'm
workplace, right?
done.
But it might be,
Yeah.
do I move to a different team? Do I ask for a different project?
Mm.
Do I want to get HR or leadership involved, especially if there are formal policies in my organization, right,
Yeah.
that speak to how we're supposed to manage this? And
Mm.
again, those can be additional places and spaces that you go for support.
Oh, that's amazing. I like how you have brought it more internally, like first
Mm-hmm.
being able to recognize your own feelings. Because I feel like at workplaces, I don't know, but I think for a long time I never knew the place of my emotions in my workplace. Or
Mm-hmm.
I didn't connect that, right? I think in my head it was work and then my emotions. So if I get angry, it's not supposed to be presented at my workplace, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's because most times when you think about work, as you said, it's the rules and there's this to be done, and so sometimes it feels when you bring in the emotions as if you're being unprofessional.
Mm-hmm.
But then this is being able to recognize, sitting with your emotions, feeling your emotions, and being said this is actually a boundary that has been crossed. And sometimes
Yeah.
we make too many excuses with our work that we cross our own boundaries, which make us feel even worse because we are
Exactly.
compromising. So that
Beautiful.
that is amazing. So I think that is so important. But also, I think the other point for me is the gray area, and I think
Mm-hmm.
mostly because we are talking about a toxic work environment, it would feel like you need to go there with a lot of force. It feels like because it's toxic already. The word toxicity already activated a certain emotion, a certain reaction,
Yes.
within my body. So I think being able to like calm yourself and regulate yourself to come to a place of, okay, you want me to work this whole weekend, so let me go back and say I can only give you 4 hours this weekend and I'll cover up one, two, three things. Would that
Mm-hmm.
be okay? Then I think taking action from there, since you've already taken a step to meet them somewhere. So I think those are such good gems. Guys, please share
Yeah.
in the comments some of the things that you're picking up, some of the gems that you're picking up, questions that you'd like us to ask at the end of
Mm-hmm.
the live. We'd like to hear from you. So I think
Yeah.
I'll be adding one Boyd, but she'll just be on standby.
Okay.
um,
Great.
yeah, let me add her. Okay, so thank you for that, Howard. That is amazing. So for individuals that are now currently working in toxic work environment, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe this is someone new, they've just joined the workplace, how would you, and they're unsure on how to proceed, how would you advise, where should they start in handling this kind of environment? And is
Yeah.
it possible to actually navigate that without losing your job? Because I think the fear of people trying one to set those boundaries and standing by them
Mm-hmm.
and meeting at the grid and then feeling as if I suggested I'll work for 5 hours, your manager will look at you and say, you're not even hardworking. And that feels like you're compromising. So it's either am I going to pay rent this month, or should I just shut up and, you know, um, be humble
Yeah.
and just accept. Yeah. So how would you advise someone who is just starting out and they've realized this is not this environment is not the best, and they do not have the luxury to actually move jobs or
Yeah.
even maybe move the teams? Yeah.
Yo, like this is such a good question. And that is like such a, like, let's acknowledge that that is such a difficult and uncomfortable place for our
True.
egos to be, right?
Mm,
Because it also spins out this narrative that like I have no options and I'm stuck, right?
mm,
And I think that's the first thing we need to recognize. And I'm going to come back to starting internally, because I think so much of this and so much of what I've learned is that it's the stories I'm telling myself in my head. Um, and it's the black and white thinking that I'm having
yeah.
about a situation, right? Like,
Yeah.
and you touched on this a little bit already, Leah. Like, you need to know what your own internal boundaries are. You need to know
Mm,
what your own line around respect is. Not, oh, there's a different line of respect for my friends versus my boss because my boss is above me, is better than me, and it is my role to have to be on my knees when it comes to this person.
mm,
You need to know whether you need to know that regardless in whatever the situation is, what your own boundaries around your self-worth are. And I think that's
yeah.
so important because we don't get taught this. Tell me, when in
True.
school were little children ever told, "Hey, I want you to think about when it's a no for you. I want you to think about what is
Mm,
absolutely unacceptable for you." We're not taught that. In fact, and I even see it with like my young cousins, we are taught and socialized to be agreeable. We are taught and socialized to be people pleasers. So I think the first step is even checking ourselves on in what situations am I a people pleaser? In what situations does my people pleasing come up and it overshadows my own sense of self respect? Because
mm,
that is powerful.
mm,
That is so powerful to be able to
yeah.
recognize that in yourself and to be able to recognize it in your romantic relationships, in your friendships, with your boss, with your
Mm,
colleague, with your family. It's incredibly powerful to be able to know, like, hey, I am recognizing that something in this dynamic is not right and is
yeah.
not healthy for me. And then the second thing I would say, especially for people who are starting out, ask yourself why you're at the job you're at. And I know this maybe seems like a bit of a weird question. I mean, it's not one that it's not one that anyone ever told me to ask. The assumption was always go to university, get a job, and then your life will be good, right? That's also like the dream that we're sold, that the goal
Yeah.
is to get the job and be in a job, and then everything else will sort itself out. But I caution everyone, ask yourself why you're in the job that you're in. Is this a job just to pay the bills? Because if it's a job just to pay the bills, then guess what? You don't have to be as emotionally invested in it. If you're like,
Mm,
listen, this job is to pay off my car, it's to keep my lights on, And if it's not this job, it'll be another job. That can give you a sense of freedom as opposed to getting your ego wrapped up in, oh, well, this job and this title and this team says something about who I am. Because if you're very clear that, like, no, I just need 500 Kenyan shillings a month to pay for water. So if I'm not getting it from this job, I can get it from another job. That's really powerful when you free yourself from the idea that the job and the people who have power over you in the job dictate your worth and dictate where you
Mm,
have to keep yourself, right? Because it's very
yeah.
different knowing I'm in a particular job because it's exactly the thing I want to do. It's the dream that I've had. It's the network that I want to tap into. Once you can get clear that, hey, I'm in this job for certain reasons, you can put your focus on that. And
Mm,
that way, when a boundary is crossed, it gives you the freedom to say, great, I knew what I was getting out of this. And now that I'm not getting it anymore, now that my needs aren't being met, I don't have to stay here because it literally doesn't meet my goal. I
yeah.
know for myself, Leah, I spent a lot of years being like, the goal is to make a supervisor happy. That's my self worth. I spent
Mm,
many years doing that. And
yeah.
life has to knock you down sometimes to make you realize, actually, the point is to know what I'm doing here and what I'm trying to learn and get out of it, who I'm trying to connect with, what
Yeah.
things in my personal life are served by being in this job. And I think, again, these are bigger internal questions that go above and beyond what anyone in the workplace is saying to you or not saying to you, right?
Yeah.
Because like Buddhas and these spiritual leaders, when they reach enlightenment, they're untouchable. Nobody can bother them. Like if you want to disrespect them and not treat them well, they'll say, "Great, you're entitled to treat me that way, and I'm also entitled to walk on my path and continue." Right? And I think
Mm,
so much of work is being able to dismantle the mental stories that we tell ourselves and that we've been told about what work means in our lives and asking ourselves if
um,
that's what it really means in our lives, and also taking away the emotions that are connected to it. You said this earlier, a lot of us are running around as our inner child
yeah.
and looking to a job to validate us maybe the way a teacher didn't validate us, to validate us maybe the way mom and dad didn't validate us,
Mm,
right? For the friendship group that maybe feels more friendly than the relationship we had with our siblings. A lot of us are getting that from the workplace, and it's not
mm,
bad to get that from the workplace. At the same time, I want people to recognize that is not your only source of being fulfilled in those ways. So
mm,
don't now graduate high school, graduate uni, get into the workplace and be like, I'm locked in, I'm stuck. It has to look this way, because it doesn't. It really, really
mm,
doesn't. And that starts on the inside first by being able to reconcile and identify that within yourself so that
yeah.
no place or person can have power over you in terms of the options that you tell yourself you have.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's
Mm,
probably the best answer I can give to that because, again, we only have control over the self.
true. I love
Yeah.
that. I love that. I think that like that has definitely changed my perception on how I was viewing this topic, by the way.
Hmm.
And I think when I was thinking about this topic, I think for me it was more external. And I think now I'm viewing it from an internal place. And I really
Yeah.
agree that we have certain perception about work, just like about any other relationship that we have in our lives.
Hmm.
And so I think defining what this relationship needs to look like is really important
Hmm.
because then that's when you're able to also set those boundaries, being able to enforce them, know where it's a cutoff line, know why you're there and what you need to be achieving. Because most times, usually, we end up having our jobs define us than us defining what our job means to us. So I think
I love
that
that.
is, yeah, that has just like really, you're just like rearranged my mind. So tomorrow I'm going into my workplace with a different mentality. Like,
Yes, please do. Yeah.
totally. I'm going to tell them now I know my goal here. So
Yeah.
yes, that's amazing. So I know we're about in the last few minutes. I hope guys are
Okay.
enjoying the interlive. I'm just like, what man? Those people who are missing out. I'm just like, hey, they're missing out a lot. But we'll have this live on our page.
Yeah.
So make sure that those the friends that have not been able to join, you can definitely direct them to our page. So the other thing would be, how do you support support a partner or a friend that is
Mhm.
working in a toxic work environment. Sometimes that ends up bleeding from work to home. And again, this can be an issue with the boundaries. It can be, you
Mhm.
know, and so you'd find that your partner or your friends are usually like, okay, it's that job again. Yeah, it's like those relationships that you keep going back to, and your friends do not want to hear about it anymore. So sometimes our toxic work environments end up being like that. So how would you
Yeah.
advise a friend or even a spouse support someone who is in a toxic work environment?
Yeah, this one is real. I think we've all been there, every single one of us.
Yeah.
I think the first thing is to always listen. I'm such a
Mm,
big believer around compassion
yeah.
and empathy. And honestly, the truth is when someone comes to vent to you, it's because they don't have the space to do that elsewhere or in a place where they could more quickly resolve the issue, right? So there's something really powerful about nurturing a bond with someone by being able to say, I care enough about your feelings to allow you to communicate them and express them however you need to, right? I think
Mm,
a big thing as a supporter is not putting the pressure on yourself to be like, I have to fix this. And I myself have been guilty of that where I'm listening and I'm like, okay, here are
yeah.
the 5 things I think you could do. And it's like, listen, your
Internally.
friend, your loved one may have come to you being like, girl,
Mm,
I don't even need your solutions. I just needed to feel like another human could
mm,
relate and understand me. And sometimes it's even a little bit of validation, right? Like my
yeah.
brother says this all the time. Like whenever I'm talking to him about something that's frustrated me, he'll be like, you're not crazy. Like he'll
Mhm.
be like, I'm just here to tell you you're not crazy. Like the thing you've experienced is difficult, it's painful, it's disappointing. And if you're in an environment where people have normalized that, you're not crazy for feeling it
Yeah.
because other people that you respect, other people that you would keep in your circle can also say, yeah, if I were in a similar setting, I would have similar feelings, right? And
Mm,
that level of belonging is really important because we all want to belong. Whether it's
mm,
I'm belonging in the workplace and they
yes.
see me and they recognize me and they listen to me, or whether
Mm,
I can come to my I can come to my brother and talk his ear off for 30 minutes and he's like, "Girl, I feel you. I totally
mm,
understand that." Right? So listening
yeah.
is so powerful. And all you got to do is
Zip.
right? We've
Yeah.
got 2 ears and one mouth. So if we use it in that ratio, I would say number one is listen. If people ask for, do you have support? Do you have recommendations? Do you have ideas? How have you dealt with this in the past? I think
Hmm.
that's great. Like, there's always a lot to learn from hearing how other people have dealt with things, even
Yeah.
hearing how other people have dealt with things poorly.
Mm,
Often I
mm,
find there's even more to learn from when people dealt with a situation and they say, looking back, I wouldn't have done it that way because I
yeah.
learned this, and this, right? So sometimes
Exactly.
support can come from our lived experience. Support can come from other people and resources that we are aware of to support
Yeah.
our loved ones.
Yeah.
And then I think there's something there about accountability, right? That for someone who's saying, yeah, I really do want to change, or I don't want to be in this job in 6 months, or whatever the case may be, it doesn't hurt to just bring it up with them once in a while, not from a place of judgment, but just to say,
Yeah.
hey, I remember that last time we chatted and you were quite upset, you were quite in your emotions, and you were talking about not wanting to be in that place. Where are you at with that now? Do you still feel the same way? Great.
Mm,
What are some of the things that you're doing to move yourself in
yeah.
that direction, right? Because sometimes people like we a lot in many situations we have the tools within ourselves to do what is
Yeah.
required. And often, again, it's that inner child who really just wants someone to be like, you got this, you can do it, right? Yeah, right? It's like It's like when you're a small child and you're like playing a sport, and it's just the feeling of knowing your parents are on the sidelines being like,
Yeah,
yeah, you've got this, we're so proud of you. You don't need your parent to come and kick the ball for you. You can kick the ball yourself. But
yeah,
it's just knowing that people who believe in you are like, I'm here, I'm here to witness you, and I believe you can do it, and I'm excited to see you do it.
yes,
That can also go a really long way, right? Like, yes, you have to
yeah,
want the change for yourself. At the same time, knowing that people who love you and care about you are like, I'm so excited for you to be in a better job. I'm so excited for you to get that promotion. I'm so excited for you to take on that new project you've never done. Like
yeah.
seeing people you love reflect that back to you can also be really powerful. So I think that's
Oh,
also another role that loved ones can play for
yeah,
anyone they know who is going through a difficult time and is
yeah.
navigating that journey of what comes next.
Yes, oh, those are
Yeah.
amazing parents. So if you have a friend, or a partner, or even a family member who is going through a toxic work environment
Hmm.
situation, these are some of the tools that you could apply. And I also think the person when that time comes for someone is holding you accountable, know that holding you accountable from a place of love, and they're just
Hmm.
reflecting back what you say to them. Because sometimes I feel like most people feel when they are being held accountable is like you are, you know, poking at them by essentially you're reflecting back what they said to you. So
Yeah.
I think also having a different mindset of like, I had shared this with you. I actually really appreciate that you're holding me accountable for
Hmm.
action. Maybe that would also help you drive you to more action or being more, what do you call it? Being more proactive.
Yeah.
Yes, that's the word. Being more
And
proactive in general, that's taking action. Yeah.
I love that you share this, Leah, because again, from a place of childhood,
Mm,
many of us many of us, and especially from an African context, sometimes
yeah.
being raised as a child involved shame, right? Sometimes it
Mm,
involved, like, aren't you ashamed? Have you no shame? Shame. Like, even in Ghana, we say that to small children in a joking way, but it's still something that people hear and internalize. So sometimes in
mm,
adulthood, being held accountable can re-trigger some of those feelings of like, oh, now you're trying to tell me I'm
oh,
bad because I didn't do the thing. Or now you're
it's
trying to
like
tell
you're
me that I
having
should be doing
shame.
something, right? Yeah. So
Mm,
it is really
mm,
important that when we're coming from a place of love, do your best to match your approach, your tone, your tact, your timing when you talk to people, align it to love. Because your
mm,
intention might be very loving, but if you come at someone after a hard day and it's just like, yeah, how come you're behind on blah blah blah? That can be
mm.
very triggering, right?
Yeah,
So it's really
yeah,
important to make sure that we're being mindful of our tone, the way we speak,
yeah,
our tact, the words we use, the way we
yeah,
ask questions, the way we lean into curiosity, and our timing when we have
yeah.
certain conversations, right? Because
Mm,
that can go a long way towards making someone feel defensive. So yeah, I love that you brought
mm.
that up.
Oh, that's amazing. Guys, we're
Yeah.
coming at the end of the live. I feel like we had so much to cover. I'm trying to like jumble up the questions and see what to touch on. And
Yeah.
if you aren't able to like get to some of the questions that our community sent us, we'll try answer them. Maybe we can have like a Q&A or like a poster that handles one question at a time.
Oh yeah.
So
Happy to
that,
do
yeah,
that.
we can do like small posters in collaboration with Hawa that you can be posting maybe this week or no, this week has ended. Next week, Wamboi. I'm looking at Wamboi because she's the one to say go or no. Yes. So thank you for
Yeah.
validating me, Wamboi. Thank you.
We'll let the
So thank
boss
you
tell
guys.
us. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Howard. We really appreciate those are gems. My God, I feel like we need another conversation and a podcast and a webinar. Like, yeah.
Yeah.
You're such a
Absolutely. I'm here for
powerful
it.
person. Like when you speak, there's so much power in you, so much
Thank
influence. Like
you.
so thank you so much for sharing that with our community. Really
Yeah.
appreciate you sharing with our community, sharing with us, and giving us
Yeah.
your time.
Thanks
Yes,
for
yes.
having me. Thanks everyone for listening, for staying on till the end of this call. And
Yeah.
yeah, like I'm happy that the passion comes through in my voice because I am so
Yes.
passionate about this. And so again, anyone who's listening, feel free to
Mm,
connect with me. Feel free to connect with Hawa Kombian Consulting because to like this is the work. The work
yeah.
is around transforming what culture feels like, transforming the value that we get from being at work and transforming our perception of our worth when it
Yeah.
comes to what we're doing. Like that is what is going to shape Africa. That's what's going to help us become stronger. That's what's going to help us innovate and
Yeah.
develop in a way that is healthy for us, in a way that is on our terms, right? In a way
Yeah.
that supports as many people as possible. And that's what I'm here for. So thank you for bringing this conversation forward and for
Thank you.
being a group that pushes this kind of narrative in this conversation because it's so important.
Thank
So
you.
thank you. I'm extremely grateful.
Thank you so much. Just one thing I would want to say as we close up, you got the tools to handle this. Like, believe that you got the tools. I think that has just been like the highlight of this whole conversation is that you got the tools to handle this.
Mm-hmm.
Look at internally, evaluate the situations, but you have it, you got it. Yes, and so thank you so much, and I'm wishing you a happy end of week. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Thanks for being
everyone.
here.